Lovely. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar where we're going to be looking at evaluating ideas and solutions using the Wazuku platform. My name's Bea. I'm the Director of Customer Success, and I'm joined by my colleague Mariana, who's our Head of Delivery.
Good
And
afternoon,
today we're going
everyone.
to, oh, sorry, interrupting there, Mariana. Today we should be running for about sort of 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes. And there's the options to ask any questions. Just pop them into the questions tab at the bottom, and we will be able to answer those as we go. Lovely. So just in terms of what we're going to be covering in today's session, so I'm just going to be doing a small introduction into Wazuku and how we help organizations innovate with internal and external audiences. So for those of you who are new to Wazuku, we'll just give a quick introduction as to what we do and provide you with some top tips and best practice on how you can plan your evaluation process. So some of those considerations when you're setting up and planning your first challenge or even later challenges, things to think about when setting up that process. And finally, we'll be handing over to Mariana, who will be able to show you how to configure your evaluation process on the platform itself and then manage this through. So just a quick introduction to Wazuku. So as Wazuku, we work with organizations across the globe, helping them to set up, implement, and scale their innovation management programs, both in terms of capturing ideas from internal audiences. So when we're thinking of an internal audience, those within the organization itself, as well as capturing ideas from outside that organization. So be it suppliers, customers, partners, and even the wider world. So as well as the platform itself, we also provide a problem solver sort of base of around 500,000 people globally. So giving you the opportunity to be able to solve problems inside and outside your organizations. So our platform allows organizations, as I say, both to capture ideas, but also manage those through to conclusions, providing some metrics and reporting so that you can actually track and see ideas end to end through a process and capture those outcomes. So ensuring that organizations with people everywhere and anywhere are able to capture ideas on the go and manage those through, ensuring repeatable value creation. Now, our platform is rather than just adding ideas to the platform, we're based on a challenge driven process. So, what we mean by that is starting off with a bigger, wider goal or opportunity, such as a wider project or program. It might be a sustainability initiative, it might be an efficiencies initiative, and breaking that program down into specific challenges. So that's actually breaking it right down to specific problems which are actionable and can be solved by a crowd of people. What this allows organizations to do is make it easier to get ideas through to conclusion because ideas are implementable by the organization, they're in scope, and you're more likely to get that value out the other end. So once organizations define those challenges with us, the next area is to actually select the channels. So who's the right audience to help solve this problem? It might be the internal audience. We've just talked about your employees. It might be those outside of the organization. And in fact, it might be both. So what we often see is organizations running the same challenge in parallel to different audiences to see what different types of ideas and really get that diversity of thought and opinion around the actual challenge or problem itself. Ideas, so once those channels have been selected, the challenge has been launched, ideas are then gathered and those solutions are then evaluated. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Once you've captured all those brilliant ideas, how can we actually make it easy to be able to select and take forward the ideas that you want to, or those more fully formed solutions, and actually reject the ideas which perhaps aren't right for you now. Once those ideas have been evaluated, the solutions are then integrated into the organization and executed upon. So this as a process is just a great way of ensuring you get ideas which are actually aligned to your business problems, that they actually can be solved, and that you're making it as specific as possible. So, in terms of evaluating ideas, when we're talking about the evaluation process, It's really that initial review or stages of reviewing ideas and determining, is this an idea or a solution we want to take forward? Is this an idea selection that we actually want to pause and revisit in the future? Or is it something that we just don't have the resources or feasibility or funding to be able to take forward now? That's what we're thinking about in the evaluation process itself. And when we see evaluation taking place, we typically see it as a staged process. So rarely do we see a single yes no decision. What we would typically see is an initial filtering of those ideas where you might be checking for duplicates, incomplete ideas, followed by a more considered selection. So typically it's more of a staged process with different stakeholders being involved at different points in that process. And actually, when we're thinking about evaluating ideas, this will depend, of course, on the types of challenges you're looking to run, the types of your ideas that you're looking forward as well. So it may be that you have a challenge which is looking for, let's say, new products and services. That evaluation process might be slightly different to a challenge which is really more focused on incremental improvements. And so the first recommendation we make when thinking about that selection process is firstly to consider it as part of the process of planning your challenge. So think of this rather than just, let's say, waiting till you've got all those ideas and then deciding what you're going to do with them. Think of this as part of the actual challenge planning process. And when you're planning a challenge, we typically think of 5 key areas as part of that challenge setup. So, firstly, the challenge sponsor, so who's responsible for the problem or opportunity. You'll also probably be considering the questions. So, what's the problem that you're looking to address by running this challenge, or what's that opportunity you're looking to reach? Who's that audience for the challenge? Who's the people that you want to be able to target this to? And how can we make that as broad as possible? What's going to be your process, which is what we're going to be considering today for selecting those ideas, and what timelines are you thinking of for having that challenge live, selecting your ideas and then taking those forward. So these are kind of the framework that we use when we're working with customers planning a challenge for the first time. And actually, in subsequent webinars, we're going to take you through this process end to end, thinking about all the recommended best practices for planning a challenge. But jumping forward to the actual challenge process and the selection process for your ideas, there's a couple of key considerations you want to think about when selecting or designing your selection process. So, firstly, do you already have a process that works? Now, it might be a process that you've been using online. Typically, people are coming to us and they say, we already have a matrix. That might be something you've already got in place, or in fact, not even within your team. It might be a process that your program managers or other parts of the organization are already using. One of the other key considerations is who's going to be involved in idea selection. And again, where you're most likely to fall over with your evaluation process is not engaging the people who will be part of the idea selection early on in the process. You really want to bring them into the challenge planning and challenge design process, both so they know what's expected of them, but most importantly, to get their buy-in, because that group of stakeholders is likely going to be involved in the implementation of those ideas. So you really need to think about who the right person or people are, who your decision makers are, and ensure you've thought about what's going to happen to those ideas post the evaluation. And the third thing we want to be considering is what criteria will you be selecting your ideas against or on? So what is it that makes a good idea and what makes a not so feasible idea for you? And actually, how can you integrate that into your evaluation planning process? Now, if you're running a challenge for the first time, we recommend keeping it as simple as possible. And we've got a recommended process here for actually getting your ideas right through from the submission through to a point where you've selected them for evaluation. So we typically recommend a 4-stage process whereby ideas are submitted. Probably leave about a month for people to be able to submit those ideas before taking all the ideas through to an initial review, where you can do a bit of an assessment based on the feasibility and strategic fit of that idea, taking forward a small number of those suggestions or ideas for a final review. So you might take the top 3 to 5, give your idea creators or your teams the opportunity to pitch those ideas, and ensure that, let's say, 3 to 5 or a small number are taken forward for implementation, where they can then be actually put into the process. You can celebrate the winning idea creators through some form of reward and recognition. Now, the benefit of this process, and particularly this evaluation process, is it really allows you to manage your resources up front and manage the expectations of your idea creators or your crowd. So saying, look, it's going to be a filtered process. There's going to be a small number that get through to actual the final stages or the final implementation. But again, a good way of managing that process in a resource efficient way, and also ensuring that you're doing an initial filter so that your senior stakeholders don't have to review every idea that comes into that challenge. So it's just our recommended starting point if you're running a challenge for the first time. Now, we'd also just on this process ensure to keep it as light and easy as possible, is that you run this through once as a time-bound challenge. If it works for you and you're looking to implement a more continuous cycle or a cycle of ideas, then you can actually go forward after that and put it into motion. Now, of course, it's not just about the selection that is the responsibility of a small number of individuals, be those people who are going to be involved in the implementation, the budget holders, but also the crowd can play a role in your selection process as well. So thinking of the role of your sort of peer-to-peer evaluation. So there's a number of ways you can do this on the platform itself. And the first is to invite people just to up and down vote on the ideas. Now, typically we see more upvoting than downvoting. So it does allow you at different stages in the process just to get a bit of a sentiment check from the crowd and see exactly how many people or what the sentiment towards that idea is. Alternatively, you might choose to use a star rating system, and you might get a bit more of an average there. And what's important when you're thinking about using peers or using the crowd as part of the evaluation is being clear that their most popular idea, or the ideas with the most votes or the highest average, isn't necessarily going to result in that idea being implemented, but actually saying to the crowd, it's part of the process and it will inform our selection. Another thing you can choose to use, which we'll be talking about in a later webinar, is actual token voting. So alongside up-down is being able to say, can we give some form of sponsorship tokens to a small number of the crowd to be able to help gauge that or sense where is it that people would willing to put their sponsorship of a particular idea. So when you're planning your evaluation process, think about how you want to use the crowd to help with that sentiment and shortlisting, but how you actually combine that with your actual evaluators themselves. So once you've determined your process and who's going to be evaluating, that third consideration is actually the selection criteria. And this is really important to do up front because we want this to be part of the brief that goes out around the challenge itself. So people know what's expected of them when they're adding their ideas, and it's clear what you're going to be evaluating the ideas on. So just some of the questions is what, of course, will make a go no-go decision. So what is it that those key criteria? What's critical for you to take an idea forward? So is it that it has to fall within a certain implementation time frame, within a certain budget? And what benchmarks might already be in place? So have you already got a sense of what's feasible and not feasible, and how can you use those? So we've just listed a couple of recommended selection criteria you can use as a starting point. And the first would be time to implement. So you want to think about, actually, if this is going to take years and years to implement, but we need that problem solved right away, let's think about, as I say, how we can make that as short amount of time as possible so you can get a sense from your evaluators whether it's going to take too long and therefore be out of the scope of this challenge. The cost of the business is, of course, another key consideration, and something you should be using really as part of your challenge description. So if this is going to be too costly, too many materials, too much people time, then get people to score on that feasibility. So is it possible for us to do that with our existing resources? And get your evaluators to start thinking about, even if we really, really like something, is it actually possible for us to take forward? And another one to think about, which again, some choose to go with, some less so, is around strategic alignment. So is this something that you aligns to a program of work that you're already doing, so therefore is likely to be adopted? And finally, a question or criteria around priority. So again, some choose to go down the impact. So is this actually going to be important enough? Is it going to have a big enough impact? So just something to think about there. So just some good starting points. And I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Mariana, who's going to take you into the platform and show you how to configure evaluation and manage that process through.
Thank you, Vi. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marianna Canino, and I'm the head of the customer delivery team here at Wazoku. I work with a team of innovation consultant and project managers responsible for the delivery of the services that come with our products. As Bea mentioned, I'm here today to provide you with a brief platform demo to give you some practical insights on how to manage your evaluation process on the platform. So I am going to share my screen and ask Bea if she can see my window. Should be coming up.
Great, it's just loading. Perfect, we can see it, Mariana, thanks.
Thank you so much, Bea. So first of all, welcome to our demo site. Some of you might be already familiar with this space. It's a space which we use to showcase how you can best use our platform and leverage platform functionality. So when it comes to evaluation, you might be asked to do one of these three things to start with. Number one, as a challenge manager, you'll be asked to set up the workflow of your challenge, and therefore, with that, the evaluation stages, as Bea mentioned, to evaluate, prioritize, and progress your ideas. Number two, as an evaluator, you'll be asked to review ideas and submit the evaluation criteria for each idea you've been assigned to. And number three, as a lead evaluator, you'll be asked to evaluate ideas as a regular evaluator, but also as a lead evaluator, you'll be tasked to review all evaluation details to make an informed decision to be able to progress or not progress an idea. So to recap, today we're going to review how to set up evaluation from the perspective of a challenge manager and how to perform the evaluation tasks from the perspective of an evaluator and a lead evaluator. So let's kick this off. As a challenge manager, we're adding a challenge. You'll be taken to our challenge builder page. Now, in the workflow tab, you'll be able to set up the different stages to take your idea from ideation to implementation. Now, when it comes to setting up your evaluation stages, as Bea mentioned, ultimately you have to think about two things. In front of how many groups of stakeholders, evaluators in our instance, you will have to present the ideas to in order to filter them down to completion, and against which criteria you will need those group of evaluators to evaluate ideas against, to be able to prioritize them and understand what ideas have merit to be progressed. Once you have these two sets of information, you'll be able very easily to build the process for managing ideas onto your platform. So taking Bea's example of your workflow, let's pretend we have a quite straightforward process, and we've decided that we're going to have an initial panel of evaluators to assess ideas against viability, feasibility, and desirability, which is a quite common framework to be able to compare and prioritize ideas. And a second evaluation stage where we're going to present our ideas to our senior leadership team, and we're going to ask them to evaluate ideas against, let's say, strategic fit and alignment to business priorities. So what we're going to do is that we would like to add an initial evaluation stage, which we're going to call initial review. And we're going to add a second evaluation stage, which we're going to call leadership review. Now, by clicking on the configure button of your stages, you'll be able to set up the general setting of your stage. You'll be able to decide if you want creators to be able to edit their ideas in this stage, if you want ideas to be private or public, for example. You'll be able in the evaluation criteria to add your criteria in the form of rating scale, text fields, or checkboxes. So we said that we want to add for the first stage of our evaluation process the 3 criteria around viability, feasibility, and desirability. I'll then be able, by clicking on the Evaluators tab, to add here the first group of evaluators that I've identified. So I'm going to add my colleagues to this space. I'm going to add Olga. I'm going to add Dino. I'm going to add Christiana. And at this stage, you can also decide who is going to be the lead evaluator. So as I said at the beginning, the difference between an evaluator and the lead evaluator is that the evaluator will be asked to evaluate ideas against the criteria that we're selecting in the evaluation criteria tab, while a lead evaluator will be able, on top of submitting the evaluation criteria, also of submitting the decision, and therefore progress or not progress the ideas. And then in the final tab, in the progression settings tab, I'll be able to build some very useful automation process, which becomes quite handy, especially when you have a large amount of ideas to evaluate. And you'll be able to say, for example, that if I get a minimum average score of 4.8 out of 5, and I get a minimum number of evaluators, 3 out of 4, the ideas will automatically progress to the next stage. I'll be able to do the same thing for the second evaluation stage. So I'll be able to set up my evaluation criteria. I'll be able to set up my evaluators. And now let's pretend that I am a very efficient challenge manager, and I managed to present a very interesting challenge around how do we reduce waste across your organization. So you can see now here that I've built my workflow with the 2 evaluation stages in order to take our ideas from ideation to implementation. So I've completed one of the 3 items that I've mentioned at the beginning. And as a challenge manager, I've set up my evaluation stages. Now, still have 2 things to walk you through. The first one is, as an evaluator, how can now I evaluate ideas? So as a regular evaluator, I can access my tasks and the ideas that I need to evaluate from my task list up here, which I find quite a useful tool to redirect your evaluators to, as it is a comprehensive to-do list of all the ideas that they need to evaluate, providing them with a list of the tasks that they need to complete, which is a very good way to keep them accountable. So from this list, I'll be able to jump into one of the ideas that I have to evaluate. I'll be able to review the details that the idea creators has shared to find out more about the idea and what the idea is all about. I'll be able to see if there's any comments attached to these ideas. And from the evaluation tab, I'll be able to submit my evaluation criteria against the criteria that our challenge manager has defined. I can also see what other evaluators have been scored this idea against, and I can have a private conversation with the evaluators to get a sense of what's the sentiment around this idea, which will enable your evaluators to manage the entire evaluation process online, eliminating the need for unnecessary online or offline meetings. And by clicking on submitting evaluation criteria, my task as an evaluator is now completed. And I can now access the next idea to evaluate and therefore complete my task as an evaluator. 2 minutes to go. I've realized that I've been talking for quite a lot. Now, as a lead evaluator, which is the last thing that I would like you to walk you through today, I can submit a decision and understand which ideas I want to progress. So as a lead evaluator, I can access my tasks here as well. Now, the difference is that as a lead evaluator, I'll have a second list of ideas against which I need to submit an evaluation decision, which is different from submitting the evaluation criteria. Now, as a lead evaluator, I find the evaluation tab quite useful. And the reason why I find that useful is because the evaluation tab provides you with an overview of the evaluation details for all ideas, provides you with a space where you'll be able to compare ideas, see how many evaluators submitted their criteria and the average rating score. And therefore, from this page, select the ideas that you believe have merit to be progressed and submit my decision, as well as sending a personalized message to the idea creator, which is even more important when we're rejecting ideas, to build a strong relationship with our audience who has put effort and resources into participating into our program. And so by clicking on submit decision, as you can see, 3 of the ideas that I've selected have now moved to the second evaluation stage, where I'm asking now my leadership team to review the ideas. So today you've learned how to set up your evaluation stages within your workflow, and you've learned how your evaluators and your lead evaluators can perform the evaluation tasks. Unfortunately, we don't have any time for questions, but as you know, my team and I are always available for any further clarification. So thank you everyone for your attention.
Thanks a lot for that, Mariana. And just a final word from me. See, there haven't been any questions. We can stay on for anyone who would like to ask us any specific questions. But just a note around our upcoming webinars. So we, of course, had today's around evaluating solutions, and our next 2 will be more on the topic of how you can use Wazuku for various programs and initiatives, focusing next week on improving ways of working. So how can you use it to manage incremental changes across your organization, and what are our recommendations around that? Followed by a webinar on the 3rd of February around using Wazuku to develop new products and services. So in a similar style to the ones we've previously been running, these will be available for you to download if you're not able to make the session itself. So thanks for joining us today. We'll stay on the line a little bit longer if anyone has any specific questions, but for everyone who's joined it, thanks very much.